All right, good morning, everybody. It's early o'clock here. Excuse the morning voice if I have a morning voice. Been scouring the interwebs trying to find all the specs on the R5 Mark II. It's no longer a rumor. It's finally been announced, so this is awesome. Super excited for this camera. I've been an R5 user since day one, pre-ordered it when it was announced, and have been loving the R5. I personally think the R5 is Canon's best camera to date. I think it's absolutely amazing, and the R5 Mark II looks like it's going to be even better. Not by a little bit, but quite a significant amount. But also, that's also reflected in the price, because apparently the price is $4,300 USD, which is, I think it's a little bit much. Personally, I think it's a little bit high. I was thinking maybe 3,900 USD, but 4,300 is, it's a pretty big jump from where the R5 was launched at. So, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, if you're buying an R5 Mark II, you're a working professional, you're making money with your camera, you're shooting things. And the one interesting thing you'll kind of like, you'll think about when we look at the specs is that, is the R5 Mark II the real flagship instead of the R1? I don't know. You could make an argument for that for sure, based on the specs. So I'm just going to go over the specs here, and we're going to talk about the overall specs to the camera, then we're going to talk about the photo specs, and then the video specs. So that's how I'm going to break down the video. So let's start with the camera spec. So first off, we have a newly designed sensor, 45 megapixels stacked backside illuminated sensor. So what does that mean? A stacked sensor has a faster readout speed. It's not as fast as a global shutter, which would have been nice, but for those of us, like for me, I shoot a lot of weddings, portraits, that kind of thing. So it's not really going to make much of a difference in terms of what I shoot. But if you shoot sports, if you shoot wildlife, anything like fast action, cars, whatever, that kind of thing, it's going to be a huge, huge plus, because you're not going to get that wobble or that jello-y effect in your shots. You're not going to have like a golf club kind of arced through the shot. So, I mean, a faster readout speed, absolutely awesome. So that's a huge plus. Next up, we have the on-off switch, which has finally been moved to the right side of the camera. It used to be on the left side. So, I mean, it's always nicer when you have the on-off switch on the right side where your trigger finger, so you can actually pick up the camera, flip it on, and start shooting right away. So if you're shooting a wedding, for example, and something happens and your camera's off, you can just flip it on and shoot immediately instead of having to reach over to the other side of the camera and turn it on. So that's a huge plus. I've been asking Canon for that for a long time, so I'm happy to see that it's finally here. There's a new electronic viewfinder with 5.76 million dots. And here's a picture from Jared Poland's video here, and you can see that the viewfinder is massive. So it's actually got the viewfinder from the R3, and it also has the eye-controlled autofocus. So the camera will be able to read your pupil, and wherever you look is where the autofocus is going to go, which is great for sports and action photographers. But if you shoot glamour, you might end up focusing on the wrong body parts. Anyway, I know, silly glamour photographer humor. I used to shoot a lot of glamour stuff, so yeah, I can sympathize with that. But yeah, so I controlled AF, brand new EVF, better magnification. I'm personally, like, I've played around with Hasselblad cameras, and when you look through the EVF, you see a massive photo. Like, everything is zoomed in and you're in your photo, and that's so cool. And with the R5, and especially Canon's lower end cameras too, it's just like you look through that little hole and you're looking at your picture, your EVF, and it's just so small and it seems so distant. So hopefully there's a nice magnification here too, and it looks like you're in the photo, so you're, I don't know, it's a better experience when there's more magnification looking through the EVF. So hopefully there's a good magnification to go along with this bigger EVF. Okay, next up we have IBIS. IBIS has 8.5 stops in the center of the frame and 7.5 stops around the edges. I've never heard IBIS explained like that before, but the big question is if you're shooting video with this is the 15 to 35 or any wide angle lens. I know on the R5 they fixed this in firmware, but it still wasn't perfect. You got a lot of wobbles in the corner of your image when you're shooting with a wide angle lens. So hopefully that's gone with the R5 Mark II. Another thing I didn't see mentioned, which I was hoping to see mentioned, is that you would have some sort of adaptive IBIS. So the camera would know if you have, let's say, an 800 millimeter lens on the camera, or you have a 70 a 24 to 70 millimeter, or if you have a 15 to 35. It would be nice if the IBIS was adaptive. Like maybe they need some kind of like AI IBIS so that, you know, the camera knows you have a 15 millimeter on the camera and it'll just tighten up the wobbles in the corners. So I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but no mention of it. And hopefully, fingers crossed, there is something like that, because the corner wobbles with the wide angle lenses when shooting vlogs or videos was just absolutely terrible. All right, next up we have a new battery, but it's the same form factor as the previous generations. So all your old batteries will still work on the new camera, and the new battery, I believe, will work on the older cameras, but it's gonna need a firmware update from what I heard online. I don't know, don't quote me on that. That's just what I heard. But anyway, the new battery has a greater power output. So of course, with the R5 Mark II, you can shoot 8K up to 60, I believe. Well, we'll get there in the video modes. But anyway, the R5C used the regular batteries, and it just, that thing just ate through batteries super fast. Now we have a battery with greater power delivery, but I have a feeling that the R5 Mark II is also going to eat through batteries really fast if you're shooting in the higher end video modes. And I didn't see any information. Hopefully there's like a USB PD power supply or something you can plug. I don't know, it'd be good if there was like a built-in D-tap or a battery grip with D-tap or something, so you can plug in a V-mount battery into the camera and just record longer. I don't know, I didn't hear any information about that, and I didn't see anything, so fingers crossed, hopefully you can do that, because I'm guessing that this R5 Mark II is just gonna drain batteries super fast if you're shooting video. Okay, and the one thing that got me super excited for the R5 Mark II is it has a new chip. I mean, it's got the Digic X processor, but it's also got another chip specifically designed for autofocus. I don't remember what they called it, something intelligence AF or something. It was too early o'clock in the morning, I don't remember, but it's basically got a dedicated chip specifically designed to have predictive autofocus and track subjects. So that is pretty cool. A lot of processing power is just going to autofocus. And watching Jared Poland's review of the R5 Mark II, he tested it out on like a basketball game, testing out the autofocus, and it was locking on to the person who had the ball, which is nuts. I think there's a new like action mode, so you can pick your sport and it knows it's the camera will know it's basketball. It'll know to track the person with the ball. It'll probably read the ball and then track the person attached to it. And it was just incredible how fast the camera was just locking onto the person with the ball. It's absolutely nuts. So this new chip in there that's designed for autofocus tracking looks like it's amazing. Another cool feature on the camera is face recognition. So you have 10 slots you can upload faces into. So let's say you're shooting a wedding and you have the bride and the groom, you can register their faces in, you know, 2 of the slots. So if the bride and groom are walking through a crowd or the first dance or whatever, the camera's autofocus isn't going to jump onto somebody in the background and focus on them instead of the bride and groom. So that's pretty cool. And apparently, when you put your faces in, you can, you know, touch the screen and drag the faces around, so it'll prioritize them 1 through 10. So whoever's in the number 1 spot. So obviously put the bride and the groom in 1 and 2, and the bride's mother in 3, 4, 5. Don't put her at the top. But in any case, that's pretty cool. Like, I'm looking forward to using that tech for sure. All right, so now let's talk about one of the negatives with this camera. It's not a super negative, but it's one of those things that kind of makes me think, like, why? So we have a CF Express Type B card slot and an SD card slot on the R5 Mark II, which makes no sense because, I mean, if you're spending $4,000 on a camera, you can afford multiple CF Express Type B cards, and they are faster, read and write speeds. So it doesn't make sense. So let's say you're shooting a live action sports event or wedding or whatever, and if you're shooting RAW to both cards, which you typically want to do because you want redundancy, in case one card fails, you have everything backed up on the other card. You can buffer, or you can clear the buffer faster going to the CF Express Type B card, but if you're also shooting RAWs to the SD card, it's going to slow down the whole process, which doesn't make any sense. And also, if you're shooting video, let's say you're shooting 8K video for a client, you can't back up that video onto the SD card at 8K as well. So what's the point of having 2 card slots if there's no redundancy, right? You have to record to an external recorder or something. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense. I'd rather see 2 Type B card slots. Now, if you're a user of the R5, you'll know that switching between photo and video mode can be a bit of a pain because you have to go to mode and or program a button to do it. Now there's a dedicated photo video switch, but But unfortunately, it's on the left side of the camera, which doesn't make any sense. Again, Canon, like why? If anything, just take that little LCD screen and put that on the left side of the camera. Because I mean, if you're shooting photos and you want to get the video, what do you have to do? Reach over your camera to switch it so now you can shoot video? It doesn't make any sense. And of course, with the old R5, and I'm sure this is also, you know, available on the R5 Mark II, is your video settings in the C3 custom functions. If you hit the record button while you're in photo mode, will automatically record in those C3 video functions. I'm sure that's possible on the R5 Mark II. I can't see why it wouldn't be. But in any case, there should have been a switch close to the EVF that you could maybe reach with your thumb to go from video to photo instead of having to reach over to the other side of your camera. Because if you're holding your lens like this and you're shooting, you have to reach over your camera. It just doesn't make any sense. Why is the photo video switch over there? Canon, come on, don't put any buttons on the left side of the camera unless it's a button that you're never going to use. I mean, that's what makes sense. All right, and the last note on the camera body is the screen. The screen hasn't changed. It's still the same kind of screen. It doesn't articulate and flip. You know, the new Sony A7R4 has a screen that can flip up so you can look down and shoot, and it also flips around. We were kind of hoping that that would be the new norm for all the cameras and all the high-end cameras, but we just have the same old regular flip out screen that you get in the R5. Which isn't bad, I'm not complaining, but it would have been nice to have that flip up and around screen. But anyway, moving on to the next thing. All right, so now let's talk about some of the photo things. We have eye-controlled autofocus. I put this in photo because I don't know if this is going to work in video as well. There was no mention that it works in video. Everyone seems to be shooting photos with the eye-controlled AF. I'm assuming it works in video, but I don't know for sure. That's why I put it here in the photo section, which is pretty cool. So the camera tracks your eye, and wherever you look, it focuses. We kind of touched on this already, so I'm not going to repeat myself. Now, here's the really cool thing for you sports and action shooters. You can shoot 30 frames per second electronic shutter in 14-bit RAW. So if you're shooting sports and action, that's absolutely amazing. And at 45 megapixels too. So that's why I kind of call the R5 Mark II, maybe it's the sneaky flagship, maybe it's the R1 killer. I'm sure the R1 has way better specs, but I mean, if you're shooting sports and action, 45 megapixels, 30 frames per second, 14-bit RAW, like what else do you really need? That's pretty cool with eye autofocus tracking. Like, I mean, that this is like a dream. 12 frames per second mechanical, so if you want to shoot with the mechanical shutter, you can go 12 frames per second, so that's pretty cool. Here's an interesting thing. In-camera upscaling to 179 megapixels. So that's kind of cool. So you can actually take your RAW files in camera and process them into JPEGs, and it has AI learning. It'll get rid of noise and sharpen up the images. But you can upsample your 45 megapixel RAW file to 179 megapixel JPEG. Now, is it going to be good? Is it going to be over sharpened? How's it going to look? Does it look natural? Does it look fake? I don't know. I'm going to have to play around with it. Like I said, I pre-ordered the camera, so this is one of the things I want to test out. But that's pretty crazy if you can take a RAW file and turn it into a 179 megapixel image. But I mean, what is it really good for? Because most people post their images on social media anyway, or save for web. So what are you going to take your RAW file, blow it up, and then shrink it down again? So one thing I want to test though is like if you take that RAW file and shrink it down to 1080 or whatever for Instagram, or if you take the RAW file, blow it up, and then shrink it down, which one looks better? Does it make a difference? I'm curious. So yeah, if you're curious too, definitely subscribe to the channel because we will be making videos about the R5 Mark II. What else do we have here? You have pre-shooting on the R5 Mark II. This is something a lot of people have been asking for. So you can shoot 15 frames a second when the shutter is pressed, like the shutter release button is pressed halfway. It'll just keep shooting 15 shots, and anything beyond that, it'll just trash. But yeah, so if you push the button halfway, you're pre-shooting, and you push it all the way, you shoot. So that means like if you have that feature turned on, you're shooting 16 shots every time you push the button. So you definitely want two CF Express Type B card slots. But in any case, for those people who wanted that, I think that would be super helpful for sports and wildlife photography, just so you don't miss the shots. For portrait and wedding event photographers like me, I don't think it makes much of a difference. Although, you know, maybe in weddings it might make a difference depending on what's going on. So yeah, that's it for photo. Let's move to video. All right, waking up little by little. Little by little. Let's go into the video. So video settings. First things first. Now, everybody's been asking for this who shoots video. You finally get C-Log 2. So we have C-Log 2 in the R5 Mark II. And you get a full-size HDMI port. So yeah, you can all rejoice. Everybody's been like, oh, I want full-size HDMI. So now you got it. You can't complain. Also, speaking of complaining, everyone was Everyone was complaining about the record limit being 30 minutes. So now there is no record limit. You can just record and record and record. And that is awesome. Thank you, Canon, for that. Although, you know, it's like 5 years too late, but here it is. So we have no record limit. All right, so here's an interesting feature, and I'm not sure if it's going to meet expectations or fall below the bar, but you can record video and shoot JPEGs at the same time. But here is the caveat. You can only shoot in 1080p when it comes to video, and you can't shoot any slow-mo or anything like that. So you can only shoot 1080p video and capture JPEGs. You can't capture RAWs, but JPEGs, they're 33 megapixels. But here's the thing. When you're shooting video, you're usually at like 50 frames, or you have your shutter speeds at 50th of a second. So will those photos be sharp? I don't know. Are you gonna have different settings for the photos than you are for the video? Or is it just gonna take a screen grab of the video and set it up as a JPEG, which you could probably do in your video editing software anyway? So I don't know. I want to experiment with this feature and see if it's actually any good and what kind of settings or what kind of latitude you have there. Because if you're just screen grabbing a photo that you're shooting at a 50th of a second, it's probably going to be blurry. So especially if there's motion happening. So I don't know, maybe this is good, maybe it's bad. I don't know. We'll see. Next up, and this is like super exciting to people like me who shoot content for YouTube, is there's a front tally light on the camera, so I can actually see if the camera's recording, because there have been times when I'm talking to the camera and I'm not recording anything. But on the other side of the camera, when you're actually filming clients and stuff, I don't see a big red box on the LCD screen to indicate that you're recording. I would really like to see that. I saw in some videos that there's a thin red line box on the LCD, something that's very hard to see. So if that is the case, you know, hopefully Canon can update this in firmware, or maybe even give us the option in the menu to make that line thicker. So when you're recording, it's actually like a thick red line and you can see, okay, I'm recording, you know. Or maybe just, you know, a red line across the top of the screen would be great, or a bigger record dot or something to let us know that, hey, you're recording, there's no mistaking right now, right? So tally light is great, but I also would like something on the LCD screen to indicate, or to clearly indicate, that the camera is recording. All right, so another big thing is we finally have waveforms. So if you're shooting in C-Logs and you want that waveform, you got it. From what I hear, it's in like the top right corner of the LCD screen, and you don't have any options to reposition it. So if your talent is in the top right corner of the screen talking, they're gonna have a waveform over their head, which it'd be nice if you could move it around. That would be great. There's no talk or any mention of false color, so I don't think there's gonna be false color in the R5 Mark II. It would be nice if they did have that. I mean, they said it's gonna be like an R5C, but it seems to be missing a lot of those cinema features. It has some cinema features, but I don't know. We'll have to play around with it. When I get it in my hands, I'll know for sure, but no false color as of right now. The ports on the camera are in the exact same spot. So if you have your LCD flipped around and you're filming yourself like I am right now, you're gonna have all the cable connectors and things like that, the flaps blocking that screen. So you're gonna have to get a secondary screen if you want to have a clear shot. And you know what, I'll take a photo of my setup so you know exactly what I'm talking about. And it's so frustrating. It's like, why not just put the ports somewhere else? And you know what, I'm just gonna rant for a second. Canon, you created these cinema hybrid cameras with the R5, no, 5D Mark II way back in the day. And you've had so many years to move these ports around somewhere. And this camera is not a camera. Like, these cameras aren't cameras anymore. No, none of these cameras are cameras. They're electronics. They're all just electronics. It's circuit boards and wires. So you can reposition anything anywhere. It's not like you have film in the way and, you know, there's nothing blocking you from getting creative and moving the port somewhere else. So yeah, I'm just gonna keep it simple. That's all I'm gonna say about that. I wish that these ports were in a different place. Okay, so when it comes to recording specs, I'm gonna keep it super simple here. We can shoot 8K 60 frames per second raw. That's the limit for 8K, and that's pretty impressive, 8K at 60 frames per second, although like it seems kind of like ridiculous. I don't know who would want to shoot 8K, but anyway, if you want to shoot 8K at 60 frames per second, there you go. 4K, you can shoot up to 120 frames per second, which is the same as on the R5. And here's something new. I don't recall a Canon camera ever being able to shoot at 240 frames per second, and you can do that in HD. So that's 1080p, and that's kind of cool. Hopefully, it's like a really high bit rate 1080p that you can record in, because I know with the EOS R, you could record in 1080p and upscale that to 4K and upload to YouTube, and it looked great. So hopefully we can still do the same thing here with the 1080p 240 frames per second. I think that would be pretty cool. No mention of overheating or overheating issues with the R5 Mark II yet, although, you know, the camera hasn't gotten into like real YouTubers' hands who want to test it and find the flaws. So far, it's just people who are, you know, given the camera by Canon. So you don't really expect them to really be nitpicky and find the flaws. You expect them to be like, hey, this is the best camera ever kind of thing. So we'll see when this camera gets into people's hands if there are overheating issues. There is a grip with a fan that you can attach to the camera, and that grip has a fan, cools down the camera. So I assume if you're shooting 8K 60, probably even like, I don't know. See, the thing with Canon is sometimes they're sneaky, right? Like even with the R5, the overheating limit was way down here, and then in firmware they bumped it up here so it could record while it was hot. So now Canon is trying to pitch you this grip with a fan. So is the camera going to overheat at a lower temperature to force you to buy that grip with a fan? I don't know. Canon does weird things like that sometimes. So I will be testing this R5 Mark II to find out where it overheats. Hopefully it doesn't overheat shooting 4K 60, because that would be ridiculous if you can't even shoot 4K 60 without the grip. And the grip also presents other problems too, because if you want to set up the camera on a gimbal and shoot 4K 60 or 8K, and you want that smooth gimbal, your center of gravity changes because of the grip, and it just, I don't know, it's weird. So we'll have to test that out and play around with it and see if there's a negative or a positive there or how all that works. So stay tuned for that. Definitely subscribe to the channel. All right, so another thing you can do with the camera, and you can do this with the R5 too, is you can record proxies to the SD card and your main footage to your CF Express card, which is good. It'll save you a bit of time. But again, the issue is redundancy. So if you're shooting an important video for an important client and your main card fails, you're stuck with a proxy file at 2K, which is absolutely trash. And the thing is, like, if you're editing in Premiere Pro or DaVinci or whatever, you can always create your own proxy files with a preset, and you don't have to worry about that. So it's nice to have the option, I guess, but I would rather have two CF Express Type B cards just so I have redundancy, just in case. All right, so another cool feature that the R5 Mark II has is pre-recording. So it'll record video before you record video. So just like in photo mode, you have pre-shooting, so the camera will take 15 frames while the shutter button's half depressed, and then take the frame when you fully press the button. The camera will also pre-record video up to 5 seconds before you fully press the button. So that's kind of interesting, but I wonder how that works, because I don't know, I have my camera set up so that I have to actually hit the record button to record, but you can also set up the camera to have the shutter button record. So I assume you have to set up the shutter button to record in order to take advantage of that. For me personally, for YouTube stuff and content like this, it won't make a difference. But if you're shooting sports and video, you know, you get the 5 seconds recording before you actually record. That's pretty cool. Again, I don't know how fast that's going to drain your batteries though, because you're constantly recording at that time, but there you go. Cool feature. And the last feature in video mode, and this was introduced in the R7, is auto leveling. So the camera will auto level the horizon. It'll crop in a little bit, obviously, and then it'll auto level everything. So if you're one of those people who's always shooting a little bit off this way or that way, or if you're at a wedding and you've had, you know, a few too many champagnes as you're shooting and your shots are getting a little too creative, the camera will correct that in camera. So there you go. All right, so those are the specs for the R5 Mark II. Let me know in the comments down below, what do you think? Do you think the specs are worth it? Were you expecting more? Were you expecting less? Is this hitting your expectations? Is it below or above your expectations? Let me know in the comments down below and we'll talk about it. Also, I started a Discord server, so if you're on Discord and you want to join the server, it's for subscribers of my channel. Subscribe to the channel, come join the Discord server, and you can post your photos, post your videos. We have a bunch of different chat rooms. You can talk about different cameras, specs. We can talk about the R5 Mark II and what you think about it. And I'll also be posting exclusive content and shots I take with the R5 Mark II when I get it over there. So yeah, if you want to join the Discord, I just started it. I think there's 6 people right now, but hopefully that grows fast. And I'll see you there. And of course, subscribe to the channel if you want more R5 Mark II content. And with that being said, thanks for watching. This is a quick, just little specs video, but there will be a full review video when I get the camera in my hands. All right, see you guys in the next one.